Welcome, 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 everyone. Welcome to this episode of Crashes and Taxes. I am your host for this podcast, Rebecca Walser. So excited for you to join me. If you want to get to my website and find out more about me and my practice and what I do, my website address is Walser, W-A-L-S as in Sam, E-R, W-A-L-S as in Sam, E-R, and then wealth, W-E-A-L-T-H, walserwealth.com. If you haven't ever checked out our website or anything about our practice, feel free to do that. We'd love to see you and visit with you. We have a great chat team that chats with all of our website visitors, and that's really incredible. We'd love to discuss and go back and forth with you. Please give the podcast 5 stars if you like it, and please share and tell your friends about it. We are growing this podcast. It's becoming a really popular financial podcast and tax podcast, and I'm really excited about that. Crashes and Taxes. That's what we do. That's what we talk. That's what we do. And today I want to talk to you specifically about the Federal Reserve, because we obviously got the FOMC information last week from the Federal Reserve, and it was really actually interesting. So the nuts and bolts of the comments for Jerome Powell was basically that this was kind of like a Goldilocks time frame. And what he meant by that was the porridge was just right. The bed was just right. It wasn't too hard or too soft or too hot or too cold, but it was just right. And the Fed was doing an excellent job of getting it just right, and that they really didn't see any need to pull back on their stimulus of $120 billion per month, $80 billion of treasuries, quantitative easing of $80 billion a month of treasuries, and another $40 billion a month of mortgage-backed securities, what we call MBS. MBS is. So we've got $120 billion still being stimulated on a monthly basis, which translates into $1.3 trillion of stimulus right now, annualized. And even though they are not pulling back on their stimulus, we have had 25 states now. And now we have the first state that has a Democratic governor that has passed. We have a Democratic state, a blue state, Maryland, that has a Republican governor, Larry Hogan, who also did the same. But now for the first time, we have a red state with a Democratic governor that has also rescinded the bump up in federal income of $300 a week or $1,200 a month. I want to come back to that. I'm going to stick to the Federal Reserve for just a moment. And I want to come back to, everything else about the jobs claims and all of that. So we're going to come back to the economy for jobs in just a second. And let's just stick with the Federal Reserve for a moment. So we have the Federal Reserve basically saying that they think everything is Goldilocks just right, and they're not going to make any changes. However, they did acknowledge that their accommodative strategy is having an impact overall on asset prices. And so they did state that at this rate, we will have to raise rates, but not until 2023. So basically, we're talking about raising rates, but not until 2023. 2 rate hikes at a minimum in 2023. Now, as a result of this announcement, gold went down. Gold dropped substantially. And I had a couple of clients say, Rebecca, why did gold go down when the Federal Reserve made the announcements that they made this June? And the answer is because people buy gold as an inflation hedge. And so they move to gold when they see the value of the dollar dropping, and the value of the dollar dropping is what's happening in inflation. So, if I used to be able to buy a stick of gum for $1, and now the same stick of gum costs me $1.25, then we've had a 25% price inflation. So as we get inflation, the same dollar cannot buy as much. It takes more dollars. That means that dollar in and of itself is now worth less than it was before. It's not worthless, but it is worth less than it previously was prior to the inflation. So what we saw with Powell is we got the producer price index, the PPI, and it came out it had a really high, unexpectedly high wholesale price increase of 0.8%. And on an annualized basis, it's a year-over-year increase of a 6.6% year-over-year increase in prices. So that shows you and demonstrates to Powell and to the Fed that, in fact, what they are doing is having a substantially inflationary pressure and effect on not only wholesale prices, but certainly we'll see the consumer price index and retail prices as well. But we've seen the wholesale rates on the producer price index jump, and this is the highest jump that we've ever had since this PPI has been recorded by the Department of Labor, and that goes back until 2010. So we've got substantial inflationary pressure. And what Powell did recognize in that FOMC last week is that that is going to need to lead to some type of rate increases, and we're looking at 2 rate increases by 2023. So gold went down because people that thought that the Fed was going on a wild spending spree and there was no end in sight and that could go on indefinitely into perpetuity and forever, they are now seeing with the fact that this Fed has said that we will have 2 rate increases in 2023, they're rejoicing, as I'm rejoicing, to let us recognize and to let, to inform us that they realize that they cannot just inflate and stimulate 1.3 trillion at the Fed level for the next 2021, 2022, and that we will eventually need rate increases. So even though, to me, talking about 2023 is, quite far in the distance, it did give some investors some courage to say that, hedging so much into gold so fast was not necessary. And so you did see gold drop as people thought that inflation would be starting to be looked at and tamped down slightly by the Fed, even though it's so far off. The reason I really want to talk to you about the Fed today, though, is something that is really more alarming that really happened in April, and it's really in the economic sphere of the world. It's really telling that this has happened, and we have to start asking ourselves some questions about why this happened and what is it showing. Because I do think that it's representing a clear change in the philosophy running our monetary policy at the top of the Federal Reserve. Now, this applies really to all of the central banks. So the Federal Reserve obviously is the central bank for America, and the American dollar is still to this day, hopefully as long as possible, the world's reserve currency. But the Federal Reserve did change something in April that has been the way it's been done since the 1970s. And what they changed was they are no longer reporting on a weekly basis the M1 and the M2 money supply. So that's the M1 and the M2 money supply. For those of you that aren't aware of what the M1 and the M2 money supply is, M1 is basically liquid currency, so actual physical currency, plus checking accounts. So anything that you can literally, we don't use checks anymore, most of us, but anything you can write a check on, or you can, your checking account and physical currency is our M1 money supply. The M2 money supply includes all of the M1 money supply, but it also adds more longer term deposits. So it includes all savings accounts as well as all CDs and time deposits. Deposits that are basically liquid once a certain amount of time is up. And then they're in a bank. They're not in some kind of other financial institution where they're invested. So the M1 and the M2 money supply is something that we would get on a weekly basis. And then in April, for the first time since the 70s, that is now stopping, and we are now only going to get a monthly report. And, there's a reason that this reporting is being stopped when it has been going on literally for 50-something years. So there's a reason that we have stopped reporting this weekly. And we do know that with the stimulus, that the American balance sheets have exploded with savings. There is a ton of savings, and there's a ton of potential capital that could be used to go out and really spend once the economy is reopened and people are going out to concerts and restaurants and cruises and to the movies and to the theater again. Hopefully we'll get Broadway reopened. My goodness, we've got to get people back to work. You know, I feel so sorry for all these actresses and actors that, you know, just their career just vanished. And that leads me to the job report. So before I finish off and move on to the news section, I really want to finish off with this M1 and M2 money supply, and just let you know that what we've seen with this new administration is a Federal Reserve that is very interested in bringing a lot of their, you know, additional purposes. The Federal Reserve has a very, very narrow purpose in America. The Federal Reserve's goal is to keep inflation under 2%, 2% or under, and to keep, you know, to keep us at full employment as much as possible. So to help with employment and to keep inflation at a specific targeted level or less. So of course we don't want deflation, but the point is that's their mandate. And since this administration's taken over, we've seen a few of the banks, the Federal Reserve banks, write papers on, you know, building up specific type of minority communities and, you know, just a list of social justice kind of goals that I'm not saying in and of themselves are not good goals. I just don't think that they're appropriate for the Federal Reserve. And it is alarming to me on the economic side, and as somebody who was in the markets, that this would be where the Fed would head, because the fact that you combine this type of social justice motivation expanding their role beyond just necessarily inflation targets and full unemployment, you really have to get concerned with what does this not reporting the M1 and M2 money supply, which happened under this Biden administration, mean? And how is this Federal Reserve and the central banks of the world being leveraged to implement some of these political ideas? You know, the Federal Reserve, you would think, should be as apolitical of a division of government as possible. It's related to the money supply. But unfortunately, you know, if you have politicians that want to spend more and more and more money, they're looking to the Fed to cooperate and to show how, you know, there's this theory that I've talked to you guys about multiple times on this podcast called MMT, Modern Monetary Theory. And the theory of MMT, it's a really Keynesian economic theory that believes that basically you can print money indefinitely, and as long as you service the debt, then you don't have any worries about, you know, continuing to print money. And I completely disagree with that assessment, 1,000%. I disagree with it. I think that I can give you 2 data points that show immediately that MMT is false on its face, and that's lawyer speak. We call that it doesn't matter. You guys don't want to know the Latin term for it. But the point is, it's I don't believe it for a second. And the reason I don't believe it, I'll give you 2 points of data. We saw Q1 inflation spike and bond yields, the 10-year bond yield jump to 1.7. And we definitely saw inflation pick up substantially in Q1. So that was the first indication. And now the second indication here is we've got a May PPI that shows, you know, over a 6.6% annualized increase on wholesale prices. So we know inflation has happened since we've pumped in all this money in because of the virus. And I think those are 2 data sets that right there show you that it's not possible. So we have to really start to worry, though. And I do want to give you this caution, because I haven't really wanted to say this yet on the podcast, because it's so important that we as a world recover from the hell that we've been through in these last 18 months of this virus. And so I don't really want to be an alarmist, but I do have to say that I am seeing an alarming global trend of pushing us for a great reset. And if you want to know about this, I would really encourage you to go out to the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. There are documents that have been written that are published on the World Economic Forum website about what is this Great Reset and what is it really a clear picture of what are they wanting to do with this. And I think if you read those documents, you will start to understand the concerns I'm bringing up about the fact that in the United States, the Federal Reserve is no longer reporting what was daily numbers. M1 is tracked daily because there's specific reasons that M1 is tracked daily, but M1 and M2 have been reported weekly forever. So moving them to monthly reporting is indicative of a massive sea change of central bank policy. And it does go along with this World Economic Forum and this global reset. And I would encourage you to look at that website and to digest some of their materials on there. And then you will start to see the picture of why I am stating that this is a very big concern. And we need to wake up to what the globalized plan for monetary policy is, because these are global plans that we're talking about, and all the central banks coordinate together. Trust me when I tell you that the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, the Central Bank of Europe, the ECB, European Central Bank, and obviously the Federal Reserve do communicate. Let's move on now. I just want to talk about job situation really fast, because I did mention that we had those 25 now governors that have ended the bump up. For Florida, for example, it goes into effect in this state on the 27th of June. So even if your governor has already repealed the extra bump up for your state, it might not take effect for some time. So this is really going to help our small and medium-sized businesses get back to being able to hire workers, because people are going to have to go back to work when they lose that additional $1,200. And we have 9.3 million job openings. We have the jobs. We just don't have the people that want to work the jobs necessarily, or we might not have enough. We've always had a certain amount of job openings, but we don't have full unemployment. We're not anywhere near full employment. So we need to get people back to work. So what I would tell you is that we actually saw last week an uptick in initial filings. We thought we'd get around 359,000. We got 419,000. Why are we getting 419,000 when we have 9.3 million jobs? Because people are not really going back to work. A lot of people are not really going back to work, and that is definitely something that we need to rectify. So I am looking forward to people getting back to work, back to traveling, back to hopefully a normalized, whatever that is anymore, normalized summer. And I hope you guys are all enjoying your summer. And I would just really encourage you to go out and digest some of the World Economic Forum materials and start to understand why I am being really concerned and cautious about some of the changes that we're seeing being made here in the United States. So until next week on Crashes and Taxes, everybody, we wish you all the best.